Hello, everybody. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for being with us. We are, wow, we've got a couple people still joining us, so we're gonna just give it a second and we'll get down to business. We've got TJ Alexander with us tonight. Oh,
Hello. Hi.
hello.
And for all of those joining, I know we have shared, we're excited to do a giveaway of TJ's book, A Gentleman's Gentleman, which we're discussing tonight. Big thanks to Jess, who's joined us tonight and is providing our giveaway copies so that we can do something fun. We know that the live has some fun energy, so we wanted to encourage you to join us live if you could. Thank you, Jess. Okay, great. Well, I'll go ahead and kick us off. First, I want to thank again TJ Alexander for joining us tonight. We are so excited for their new book, A Gentleman's Gentleman, already a USA Today best-selling book, their first historical romance. We could not be more excited or chuffed in the British romance canon to have TJ's book in the historical romance canon. I know a number of us read across contemporary and historical romance, and I know Jess and I both buddy read Second Chances in Newport Stephen last year, so we were so excited to see you writing historical, and so just delighted to have you with us tonight. So welcome to all of our Romancelandia University students and friends who wanted to join this chat and learn a little bit more about your writing process and research process for the book and experience in publishing across all forms. So like Emily said, throw questions in the chat. We'll kind of get us started talking a little bit about A Gentleman's Gentleman, but would love if you have other questions that we don't get to, please put them in the chat so we can make sure those are heard as well. Okay,
Yeah. Yay. Thank you for having me.
of course. So, Romancelandia University, obviously, we have a deep love for historical romance, and couldn't be more excited to see you moving into historical romance, not only with A Gentleman's Gentleman, but obviously teased for that second book for next year. So, very curious, just kicking us off, what inspired you to write a Regency romance in particular, and how did that writing process compare and contrast to your experience writing contemporaries?
Yeah, this book has been in the works for quite a long time. This is only the second book that I've ever written, even though it's, the fifth book that's now come out. So this was a project that I kind of took up in earnest. I had like an idea that was kicking around in my head for a while about writing a trans Regency romance, and I actually had planned to co-write it with a friend of mine. Like we had like brainstormed all these ideas, and we were both kind of like a little bit obsessed with like historical menswear, and we had sort of like a rough outline that we were going to like tag team. This was like years and years and years ago, and I wrote like maybe 3 paragraphs and then gave up and said it's your turn now, and they were like, I'm an academic and like school's starting. Like I can't do this right now. Let's just put it away for now. And I was like, that's fair, that's fair, that's fair. So yeah, we put it away. That's my friend Jay. I give them a shout out in the acknowledgments of this book. Even though like by the time I did pick up the idea, years later, I was on submission. I had just signed with my agent, and we were trying to sell Chef's Kiss, which would become my debut novel. Um, and during that process, it's a very stressful process. And my agent told me, you need to work on something else right now. Please stop calling me every day. She said it very politely and nicely and professionally, but she was like, "You need something to occupy your time during this stressful moment." And I was like, "Good call, good call." So I kind of took out the notes that I had for this book, and realized, like, seeing it with fresh eyes, I was like, I'm gonna have to rewrite this whole thing. I think maybe like half of a sentence from that original like 3 paragraphs is remains in the book, but the rest was completely rewritten. The characters were like pretty revamped, pretty intensely. And I just started like working on it as more of a story of like, I don't know, just what I would have wanted to read as a young kid, like stealing my aunt's historical bodice rippers from her bookshelf in the basement or whatnot. Like I always loved those books as a kid because they were like so sexy and so like intriguing, and all the history and the manners and the etiquette. And I was raised on British literature. My mom would read us like Tolkien and Sherlock Holmes short stories as like bedtime stories. That was like her idea of like, ooh, very soothing for children. Like that man was doing heroin, but okay.
So, so cool.
So cool and child friendly. But yeah, so I always loved like the cadence of like, the language of like 1800s English. And I always thought like it would be fun to write my own version of one of those romances and make it something that I would want to read as an adult. So that was kind of like what this book ended up being. Yeah.
I'm dying to ask because you said you kept like, half a sentence of that original couple of paragraphs. Um, I just want to know if you had like Christopher figured out
No.
then
No, I
who was he
hardly.
when you conceptualize the story?
Yeah, I normally the way that I approach a book is I'll come in with a plot. I'll have like, I'll have kind of a pitch that's very like the plot like hinges on the plot, like, something interesting or unusual is happening plot wise, or a twist on something, an unexpected twist on a trope. And it's only like halfway of writing the first draft that I'll figure out like, oh, this is who this guy is. Like with Christopher especially, I think it took a while to sort of understand what his deal was. Like I knew what had happened to him, and I knew like how he ended up in his situation, and I knew all those circumstances, but it, for me at least, it takes a couple dozen words of writing in this guy's head to figure out like, who he is as a person. And once I do that, then I have to go back and kind of fix all the things that I'm like, oh, actually, he wouldn't have said that. He would have done it this way. So it's not the most efficient way of writing, but it's the only way I know how.
I love that. We got to talk to Sherry Thomas once, and I was floored by how many tens of thousands of words that she cuts. So you can know you're in very good company in the drafting process, extensive revision. And it works because Christopher's voice is so clear right
Oh,
at
thank
the
you.
start. Like, I know several of us who were sharing reviews of the book kept quoting those early interactions when he first sees James and he's just like so offended by how handsome James is, which is just such a great beat in historical romance.
Yeah,
And
they're
like,
meat ugly. I love their meat ugly.
Oh.
yeah, and you hear Christopher just immediately, like his voice is very present.
His
So
Thank you.
voice is so clear and his personality is so clear, and his love of fashion and his like softness for the people around him is just so present immediately. He's like one of the most like fully formed main characters I've read in recent memory. Like just
Oh,
like it's
thank
like
you.
page one, I know who this person is. I love him.
Yeah. I realized as I was working on this book, that I wanted his personality and Christopher's like construction of manhood, that made sense for him. I wanted it to be not necessarily historically accurate, although it did end up being very historically accurate. But I wanted to use that as like a kind of way to show modern readers, like, okay, so look, like what is manly and what is feminine is like completely in flux all the time. Like historically, like, Christopher being a man of means and being super interested in fashion and being very like, soft and more of a caretaker role to the people around him. That was for the time an extremely masculine way to present yourself. That was like, this very paternalistic and nobility sensibility where that was what an ideal man was supposed to be and act like. And horsemanship was like incredibly masked. Like you could not be more butch if you were, like a really accomplished horseman, which I wanted him to be. Because all those traits now, interest in fashion, being like, in a caretaking role of people, loving horses, all those things are now considered like super feminine. And the only reason is because society has just like shifted and decided like, oh, now we're going to like consider these things differently than we used to. So like, in a lot of ways, I wanted a modern reader to understand like, this is all like stuff that you just happen to be born into, right? You happen to be born into a time where people think this is manly and this is feminine, and it's all made up. So don't worry about it too much. It was kind of what I was hoping people would take away from that. And also, I just like really loved horses as a kid, so I wanted to give them a good horse.
I love it.
Yeah.
It's so cool too, because I think that I really appreciated, and I imagine you've probably read some Joanna Lowell too, but she did something similar recently in a rare find that I appreciated. And just that reminder to readers of like, why do you assume that people in the 1800s wouldn't have stumbled upon language that's as affirming as the language we use? Like they were people just like us. They may have,
Yeah.
decided to use they, them. We don't know, because of the way
Yeah.
history is recorded. And you kind of touch on this in your author's note, this kind of quote unquote invisible family tree. Like that history is there. There's no
Yeah.
reason to assume that people would not have been exploring all the ways that gender can present at every time in history, just because they don't do it exactly like we think of it now.
Yeah, exactly. I love Joanna's books. I haven't read A Rare Thing. It's like literally on my desk right now as we're talking. And I can't wait to get to it. But I just finished A Sure Thing, and it was just lovely and wonderful. And she also was playing with kind of the same concept with the biking clubs, and how like, oh, the penny farthing is obviously the most manly bike that we have, and your silly little mountain bikes, oh, those are never going to go anywhere. Like that, she was playing around with that as well, and it was very funny to see that we were like on the same page with that kind of thing. Yeah, because history is just like a series of weird things happening, and like it's I think a mistake to think that like, oh, everything at this point in history was this way, and 50 years later everything was this way. Like there's just a huge swath of differences, in what is happening at any moment in time. I have people ask me things like, well, what were people wearing, in the year that this book takes place? Or what would like some of the things be that people would be interested in or into? And it's like, well, that's a really like narrow question with a huge answer. Like you wouldn't be able to say, if a time traveler came from like 100 years in the future and asked you like, okay, what do people wear in the year 2025? You wouldn't be able to give like one answer like, oh, we're all wearing this. Like that's not true. Like that's demonstrably untrue. So I don't understand why people are always like so eager. Well, I know why. People really like things to be cut and dried, but to try and envision a past where everything was a very strict and certain way is like, I think a losing prospect. That's not going to give you what you want. It's going to be really like one note and one dimensional, I think.
Well, and really appreciate too that emphasis. And I've appreciated some of our current historical romance authors emphasizing that, historical accuracy is so fluid, like our understanding of it, because the way we enforce it is really gendered, really racist. Like we have,
Yeah.
because history is told by a select few people in these periods. And so the things we assume to be historically accurate or inaccurate are just
Yeah.
really biased. And
And the historical romance genre in particular, and especially, is, as we know it, basically invented in the early 1900s by Georgette Heyer and all these authors who were kind of just writing Jane Austen fan fiction, but some of it was really bad and not at all historically accurate. And because what they were doing became the canon in this genre, then everyone's expecting those genre conventions to appear in every single historical romance or every Regency romance. And it's very Tiffany problem, like Tiffany was a medieval name that if you had a character named that, it would be historically accurate in your medieval like novel, but it wouldn't sound right. And so then people would get mad and write letters. So, I think that when I was writing this book, I didn't want to do much research at all because one, I knew it would like super bog me down and also bum me out because, like you kind of touched on earlier, the historical record of queer and trans people throughout history in many Western cultures has just been completely erased or, rewritten to say like, well, this person was just like a weird freak who showed up, dressed out of the norm. And it's like, okay, well, I know what was happening, but like I don't have any proof and I'm not a historian, so I can't argue with you, and I don't want to argue with anybody. I don't care what other people think because I know I'm right. So so yeah, I was like, let's not worry too much about historical accuracy, especially while drafting. Let's just focus on the story and trying to make it good and entertaining. And the copy editor will tell me when I'm wrong about a word. And I was correct. The copy editor very much told me when I was wrong about a word.
I feel like that would be the hardest part is just the language. I mean, I did not get to grow up on bedtime stories of Sherlock Holmes, so I probably am still suffering from not being able to like think British English, but I love that.
Even if you do grow up with British English in your head, especially like the Sherlock Holmes stories, those are Victorian, which is a different era. And so I had so many metaphors in the first draft of this goddamn book that were all train based because those were like the sort of metaphors that I feel like we use today and we don't even think about their origin. Something is on track, something's off the rails, something is, cabooses. I don't know. Like all of those things have to do with a technology that was not invented in the Regency era and people would not be saying those things. So every time the copy editor like circled one of those phrases, I was like, got me again.
I did not thought of that. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting.
Can I break in really quickly? I think this is an odd moment to do it, but I have to set the secret word at caboose. Please DM at Romancelandia Uni the word caboose to claim your extra credit for watching this lecture. You may claim extra credit at any point during the winter session.
We always know when the word hits.
We always know, like you just
Yeah.
gotta wait for someone to say it, and then you just know.
Yeah.
Feels right, feels good, feels natural.
That's too funny though, because I would not have thought about that with some of the idiom use. And then also like to your point of not only entering into like the gatekeeping of historical romance, but the Regency period because of hire, because it like is just a whole other level of, to your point, false kind of enforcement of historical accuracy, quote unquote
Yeah.
accuracy. I mean, it's wild as we start to uncover just how much of Hire's works were total production of her own imagination of what it might have been like.
Yeah, and like listen, I'm fine with people just making stuff up. I think as fiction writers that's part of the job. And if you can sell it, then as far as historical accuracy goes in fiction, I'm not too fussed about it. As long as I think the vibes are good, I'm
Yeah.
I'm okay with it. But if you have this like personal agenda that you're trying to push forward and your agenda includes things like I don't really want there to be black people in this world, like then that's like another level of like hey, like maybe we all have to like take a huge step back and consider like what is historical accuracy and what is the genre convention that we have all kind of been trained to accept as like this is how it was. Yeah, it's rough because like it's two different things, and I don't want to be writing a book that Jane Austen could have written because I think I'm trying to write for a modern audience. I also don't want to write a book that a Georgette Hare fan would enjoy because that is not my audience. So like I've really got to have to just try my own thing and hope that other people respond to it. I'm glad that people have, it seems like, responded to it. So yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know people in the chat want, and we have this question written out. We're going to ask you about your own favorite historical romances and writers of queer historical romances if you have any favorites. I'm wanting to ask that now because I want to know if you are very familiar with the conventions of historical romance and if you set out to challenge any of those or if you set out to hit certain beats because you wanted it to feel like a certain type of historical romance or if that means anything to you at all, really.
I mean, like I said, I when I was a kid and I was getting into reading romances at a very precocious age, I was gravitating towards the historical romances just because they looked so much more interesting than, like, at the time, like, I think it was billionaire romances or slightly questionable, like, racist romances that I was just like, I don't know about that, y'all. But seeing someone on the cover like a Viking with like gorgeous hair and, like, the gleaming, everyone's very glistening, everyone's oiled up, like, that to me was very interesting. I was drawn to those kinds of things. And then as I got older, I kind of gave up on romance because I was coming out. I realized I was queer, and I was like, oh, these aren't for me, actually. These books are designed and written for an audience that I now realize does not include me. And I wasn't interested in reading them anymore. So, I mean, I did have kind of a chip on my shoulder when I first started writing A Gentleman's Gentleman, just because I thought, like, you know, well, that kind of pissed me off. I was like, how come, like, all of these books have only straight people in them? How come nobody, like, there wasn't even like a gay friend in the background? Come on. Like, it was just like not having it. And I think getting to the point in my life where I was like, not acceptable to have a genre as huge and well established as this, and to have had, no real instances of a queer historical romance. Now, thank goodness, we're, getting a lot more queer and trans romances in traditional publishing and in the historical space too. But yeah, I now am digging into a ton of historical writers that I really love. Like you mentioned Joanna Lowell. Her books are amazing. Cat Sebastian is like one of my all-time faves. I'll read anything Cat writes. Like, I'll be honest. Like, I love her mid-century romances. Have been some of my favorite books that have been out in the past couple of years. And yeah, I try really hard to read widely when I can. Usually when I'm working on something, I can't really read other people's work. It's a real curse. I hate it. There's a bunch of stuff that I really want to be reading right now that I just don't have the time to, because I'm focusing on a few different things. But yeah, I think as far as historicals go, I've always been a huge fan of Cats. Joanne is like a new find for me that I'm very, very excited to get into. And now I feel like I have to, like, look over on my bookshelf. There has to be other people that I'm like, oh.
Have you read any KJ Charles?
Someone asked me that recently. I think I've only read one book in that series, and now I can't remember. Magpie? It
Oh, the
wasn't
Magpie
Magpie
Lord.
Murders. That's
Yeah,
different.
yeah, yeah. Okay. So the Magpie Lord, she does a lot of like supernatural stuff. It's like that's like one arm
Yeah,
of
it was like a
the KJ Charles
magical,
backlist.
historical. Yeah.
So in a lot of historical romances, we'll have the convention of like the main couple is either pursuing a couple attempting to elope, or they're aiding a couple attempting to elope.
Yes, the
And
Gretna Green escapade.
the it's like I love it when the main couple's not going to Gretna Green, but they're either helping somebody get there or they're pursuing someone who's on their way there. And I love that you use that in this book. And it reminded me so much. KJ Charles loves this convention, and she often uses it to highlight the ways that queer men back their female friends, like back their women in their lives.
Yeah,
Like KJ Charles is always on about queer men being amazing friends to women. And I loved that this book really did that. And I don't know how many spoilers we want to get into about the details of the plot, because I know we have a couple of
yeah.
people
Has
saying
everyone kind of read it? I don't want
most
to
I'm
people
doing
spoil.
have,
the
but a
I'm doing
couple.
the
Oh, Emily
eyeball.
Wilcox is on to me. She knows I'm dying to say the phrase "any old diamonds." But that's in a later question that
Oh,
Kelsey
okay.
asked.
Okay. No, so yeah, no, I didn't know that about KJ Charles's work. I did know about the trope of, the elopements to Gretna Green, and I think I'd listened to a couple of podcasts about the history of Gretna Green, just like not as part of writing this book, just like, in my normal life years ago. And it was just all information that I was absorbing, I guess, to form into like a compact, like, ooh, what would be fun. And I think that for me, actually, the elopement that happened, the love story within this story that we get of like the heterosexuals, um there's one good pair of heterosexuals in this book and they're allowed to be happy. Yeah, the heterosexuals that we help get to Gretna Green, that Christopher and James go on this kind of wild escapade to assist. I didn't want that to be so much about, because Christopher doesn't really know this woman that he's helping that well. And he doesn't at the moment, and I won't spoil it completely, but he doesn't at the moment understand the relationship that this woman has to James completely. He just knows that they're close, and he feels that he is obligated to help her, just as a gentleman, just as like that's part of his personality, that
Yeah,
like,
Christopher
well,
just helps his own. If somebody
yeah,
like if James knows someone who needs help, Christopher is wholly obliged. Like
yeah,
that's
yeah.
at his core.
Yeah, he's a real mensch. And he his this idea that, I wanted that inside storyline, that little mini arc of that couple, to sort of illustrate not just like that Christopher is really very brave for as kind of silly and airheaded as he can be. He's a brave man who really went out on a limb, not just for himself to live the life that he wanted, but to get these people married, that really wanted and needed to be married. So like, it's an act of heroism, and it's also an act that will expose to James the sort of understanding that like, oh, Christopher does believe in love, and Christopher is not this like very closed off, isolated, cold-hearted person. He actually believes deeply in love, and cares very, very much about people in love being allowed to be with the person that they love. So yeah, I wanted it to be kind of that. I'm less interested personally in establishing that queer people, especially queer men, have to be like super great friends to straight women. I am a terrible friend to my straight women friends, just saying. So so yeah, I don't know if I need that extra pressure on my shoulders personally, but I think that's very interesting, and that there's a lot of different ways to interpret the like very, I think, heroic story of helping another couple like find their happily ever after, and then once that's done, turning around and being like, oh wait, happily ever afters, you say? Are we just handing them out now? Like,
Those available.
yeah, that's an option available to us all. Like, I think that that's a very funny way to use that plot device for sure.
Well, and that leads me to the two decisions that I loved so much in this. One, single POV romance, which
Mm.
is such a cool choice. And I'm so curious what led you to that and why it felt right for Christopher and this story in particular. And then the just all the little story avenues that it both opens and closes, I'm so
Mm.
interested in because like I love the meta humor of like when it's clear to the reader
Yeah,
who
yeah,
James is. Like, and when you're like having these hilarious conversations with the sister, and you're like, oh, okay. And
yeah.
all the little jokes, I mean, it's just so well done and so well plotted. So I'm curious what led you to that decision, which can be risky in romance. I think people tend to assume dual POV.
That's, yeah, I understand that that's what most people are doing, and I support it if the story calls for it, I think. For me, I've always thought of stories in a single point of view way. Like, every time I come up with a story, it's usually from a single point of view, and unless I can figure out a real good reason to offer that second person's point of view, or in the case of other genres, like any other number of points of view, then I don't see a reason why you shouldn't just stay in that one point of view and make it really strong. You know what I mean? Like, for me, dual POV is a real challenge, because it means that I need to get in the heads of two of these guys, and that is a lot of extra work. I've written a couple of dual POVs at this point. One was Second Chances in Newport Stephen, which had to be dual POV, not only because I was very, very cognizant of the fact that one of the main characters, Nick, is a Taiwanese American man. He's an Asian man. And I was aware that like there is this really insidious and in a lot of times unconscious bias towards making characters of that background, you know, silent and not being able to tell their half of the story, especially in a romance. So I wanted to avoid that. And I knew that we needed his point of view, if only just for that, but also because there were a lot of things in the plot that I needed to show from both guys, because there were things that we were playing with memory, and you know, this is a second chance romance, so they were both of each other's first boyfriends back in high school, and the way that they both like kind of remembered and misremembered certain things, I needed to establish that, like, you know, that this wasn't like one guy just like lying or making things up. I needed to establish that, like, no, this is how memory works and how difficult it is to establish like what actually happened to us when we knew each other when we were kids. So yeah, that was dual POV, and it was hard. It was hard as shit. Like it was just very, very difficult to me to find that balance between them and not give one more weight than the other. The sequel to this book actually is also going to be dual POV. It's called A Lady for All Seasons, and I realized pretty early on that I was going to need to switch points of view between the two main characters, and that made me so mad because I'm like, that's so much more work. But hopefully when it comes out next year, you'll understand why I had to do it the way that I did. There were just too many secrets and too many lies, and if you didn't get both sides of the story, then the reader would be completely in the dark as to what was happening. But in Christopher's
the reader loves
story,
a dual POV. Like,
yeah, when it's done well, it's done well.
Yeah.
For me though, I'm just lazy. I just don't want to do extra work if I don't have to.
Great job delivering a
Outside
single
looking
POV.
in, it looks harder. So I'm so
Yeah.
interested in that because it does, like, the way you execute the like levels of knowledge that the reader and various characters have through a
Right.
single lens
Yeah.
is really fun. And
Yeah,
it's so
because it's
different.
like we're only in Christopher's head, and sometimes we're like, Christopher, come on.
Right, because
Come on,
he is
Christopher.
like, first of all, he doesn't know he's in a romance novel, so like,
Yeah,
He
let's
yeah.
not
doesn't
cut him
know
some
he's in a
slack.
romance novel.
Yeah, he doesn't
Gotta
know.
give him
He
a
doesn't
break.
know a couple of things that we know.
Yeah, we know he's in a romance. He has no idea. And also, like, yeah, there are things that the reader knows because we're aware of the genre and we know what's going, and we read the back copy of this book and we know that he's a character in a book. And so we see these things happening, and hopefully are very excited to get to the moment where he really realizes them as well. I think it's always very funny to be telling a single point of view romance where, like, you know, they have no idea that this other person is in love with them, and to us the reader, it's so like achingly obvious, and you're just like, come on, and you're just like really getting frustrated with them, hopefully not to the point of like slamming the book shut. But I needed it to be just from Christopher's point of view for a couple of plot reasons, but also just because I thought it was funnier that way. Like, there's the scene where he goes to visit his tailor Etienne, who, like, you know, is very French and very effusive, and we know, or might be coming to understand, that like there's something going on with James and James's past that, like, you know, nothing's adding up with his story. And as Christopher and Etienne are speaking in French, which as a nobleman Christopher would have learned at college, and in boarding school, you know, they're learning, they're speaking in French, and James is reacting poorly to this kind of salacious conversation that Etienne is conducting. And at first, Christopher's very nervous that, like, oh, we've offended him. And then he's like, wait, he can't speak French. He's a servant. And you're like, Christopher, Christopher, can we think of any reason why this might be happening? Like, can we think outside the box here, my man? But like, yeah, that sort of just, I don't know, kind of airheaded, like I said, a little bit of a himbo moment. I'm just like, oh, but everything's fine, actually. I'm very rich. Anyway, moving on. like, I find that very endearing and funny. So yeah, I hope that other people had that kind of experience in reading
Oh
from
yeah.
his point of view. Because I do think that, yeah, for this story especially, it needed to be told from just like one focus, for everything to like come together in a way that made more sense to me and more of an impact, hopefully.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the moment with Jane's sister when she's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I thought it was obvious," and she's still not like revealing. It's just so good. That
Yeah, when she's just like, "Oh, you don't know? Okay." And like everyone's kind of rolling their eyes, but that's because they know things that he doesn't know.
totally. And
And
again,
when
like because he's in a romance novel, we're like, "Oh, yeah, clearly this isn't a strange family member because this whole thing just tracks for like the
yeah.
premise of a romance novel. Maybe not in real life, but
Can I tell you though, when I first wrote that storyline out in an early draft, I was looking at it before I sent it off for other people to look at, and I was like, this is so obvious. This is like so telegraphed. Everyone's gonna yell at me and tell me I have to be like more subtle with this, with James's backstory and that storyline. My first reader didn't know what was happening until like the big reveal. My agent didn't know as she was reading until the big reveal. My editor, when she got the manuscript, was like, "Wait, what?" And I was like, "Wait, have you guys never read a book?" Like, I thought it was very, very obvious. But again, I'd been like, sitting with this book for years. So of course it was obvious to me. But I was so happy that like they weren't expecting some things that ended up being like big, shocks to them. I was very, very pleased with that for sure. And yeah, the reveal that that's James's sister was, I thought, like, oh, that's gonna be so just like tedious for everyone. But like luckily,
oh, it's fun
No.
because it's like the do they know that I know that I know? Like trying to figure out like who knows what, who's revealing what. Because
yeah.
again, like even if the reader is starting to guess like what's going on, like just the levels of reveals happening on page are so much fun.
You're
Yeah.
also in this story, you're taking your time setting them up in a romantic dynamic, okay? And
Mm.
and I feel like to me it felt like you did that because of the power dynamic between them. Like we needed to like do something to make that feel not icky, to like a lordling and his servant. So and you gave us like the time and the space and the knowledge to like get there properly. So I think that the big reveal is kind of hidden in a blind spot of a lot of readers who are like, when are they going to start kissing?
Yeah.
Kiss, kiss, you know?
When does kissing happen? And then
Yeah,
they're still
like
not
we're waiting
kissing.
for them to kiss. So we're not really, we're kind of in Christopher's head a little bit, being like, la la la, James is just so beautiful. He's so handsome. He has like a cute mole. I love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
Which you've now brought up Etienne. So we've got I like crowd favorite, class favorite, Etienne's character. Curious, like inspiration for Etienne, and also the like men's fashion that you got to play with in this too. I know that that was something that you said was always of interest when you were reading books.
Yeah, yeah. If you've read my second book, Chef's Choice, you'd know I love a weird little French guy. I think they're very funny, and I think you can make fun of the French without feeling bad about it. Personally, I think you could do it. It's fine. And yeah, Etienne, I needed as first of all a plot device. I needed somebody that Christopher had as a confidant who he could speak to freely about his, burgeoning feelings for James. And I also wanted to show like a side of male friendships that hopefully felt right for the book and historically accurate, kind of in a way. Um, since Christopher doesn't have a lot of the hangups around class for, Quaker reasons, I wanted to give him a friend that not only was like, establishing again that he had a lot of close, intimate friendships with people who weren't nobles, And also that like Etienne as a gay man was like, being supportive of his like, gay best friend. Like, I'm very interested in male friendships, and obviously they're in the kissing as well. But like I think that it was important to show that like not only is Christopher like worthy and ready for romance, he's like a good guy who's like, has these close relationships. For as isolated and cut off from the world as he is, he still has managed to like, foster this friendship with Etienne where they trust each other, with stuff that, if anybody else found out, it would be really, really disastrous, right? So there's a level of trust and intimacy there that I thought was really sweet and interesting. And Etienne is also just very funny to me. Like I just love a flamboyant like Taylor. Obviously in the Regency era, there was the war, the Napoleonic Wars were happening, and a lot of men's fashion influence and women's fashion as well was being heavily influenced by military regalia, by the French, and all this stuff was happening in France where like fashion was kind of being imported to other countries, for a lot of like political and economic reasons that I'm not going to get into. They're not very sexy, but I love the idea that like men's fashion of this period was meant to be like a show of ostentatious wealth, and that like as a very masculine man you were supposed to be like presenting yourself very, very well and very, very put together. If you didn't have fashion sense as like a rich man in the Regency era, you were a total loser. Like you could have been like the richest, most powerful man in all of England, but if you were wearing like the wrong shade of hat or whatever for the season, everyone would be like, look at this loser, everyone. So like it was super important to dress well. And I wanted that relationship between Etienne and Christopher to also like be an entree to that, as well as to like look at how much I trust this guy, my best friend and Taylor, with not only do I let him know my whole deal with the gender stuff and the guy that I'm falling in love with, but I also get my pants from him. Like that I thought was like perfect, just layers of trust there for that friendship. Yeah, Etienne is going to be a character in the sequel as well. He comes back. His story is not yet finished, and he gets a very small but I hope satisfying little love story of his own in that book. Yeah.
That makes me so happy because I just love messy emotions generally, which is why I read romance. And I love all the dynamics you have with when you have a friend on page and James and Christopher not knowing how to interact with each other yet. And not, because they're both just so oblivious to the care and attention the other person has for them. And
Yeah.
so when you have a character like Etienne that's a trusted confidant, there's that like sense of jealousy, of closeness, and they trust this person and will they trust me? And I just love when we get to really dive into all of those dynamics between friendships and romantic relationships on page because it just makes for really full characters. And I'm
Yeah.
so the dynamic that you see and like James' suspicion, like not
He
knowing
is
how
so
to
jealous. He is that man. If you could see his point of view in that, like, it wouldn't be legible. I wouldn't be able to write it because it would just be like that klaxon from Kill Bill, like over and over and over again. Like, he is so enraged in that moment because he has like a good reason to believe that they're having an affair. And I could feel it, and the fact that Christopher is just like, so weird that you're like always like in a bad mood anyway. Like, and he has no idea that it's about him. It wouldn't cross his mind that someone like James would be jealous of Etienne. It would never even occur to him that that was a possibility, which I think is again very endearing and very charming. And also very, very sexy of James.
yeah, jealousy is so fun on page. Like it
It
just adds
is.
so much.
It is very fun. I know that like people get into like, especially in contemporary romance, like jealousy is so toxic, and it is. But hear me out, it can be hot.
It can be very we don't judge.
Yeah, it's fiction, everyone. Like, come on.
God, yeah, I loved the dynamic with James so much. And I like again with single POV accomplishing jealousy in a non-POV character, like hats off.
Thank
Very
you.
well done, where you can feel it as the reader, even though we're not in Jane's head.
Yeah.
So I'm curious too, I know you said you go plot first when you pitch these and as you craft them. Did you have a sense of where you were going to bring the HEA when you started? Was that pretty well baked in? Like, I've got this arc all set out? Or did you have trouble figuring out, like, what will their primary conflict be? What will be the thing that keeps them apart once they discover they both care about each other? What will be that thing?
Yeah, I think I ran into, I think early on in plotting out this book, I ran into sort of the wall that a lot of queer romance writers run into, which is like, if they want to be together, then that's going to look really different from all the other happily ever afters that you've seen in a straight contemporary or straight historical book. So then, okay, that's actually very freeing. What does that look like? What could that look like? And I think that, to me, it just felt like a very natural decision to be like, oh, actually, and I didn't want to like, I wasn't setting out to like offend anybody or like, upset the rules of the genre or anything. But in my head, I was like, no, 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 like actually, fuck it, like if I didn't end this story with very specifically that message of actually fuck your genre conventions, then like what was I doing for like the last 300 pages. So I, like I said, a bit of a chip on my shoulder while I was writing this. But yeah, to me it was very, very obvious and clear what their ending needed to be, just because like every other version that I could come up with in my head would have been a huge bummer, wouldn't have been as satisfying. To me it's very, very satisfying to see queer characters get an uncompromising, as much as possible happily ever after. And yeah, I was like, if if straight people have been making up rules and playing in these sandboxes for all these decades in this genre, like there's no reason why everyone else shouldn't be allowed to as well. So yeah, I really liked the ending. I think it was really strong. I don't want to ruin it for anyone who hasn't gotten to the end, but I hope you enjoy it personally.
Well, to your point, like you've set up this premise that we all know a lot, like I have to marry by this date to earn my
Mhm.
inheritance, right? And you lead the reader down some pretty recognizable paths to what that could look like. And I
Yeah.
think you accomplish something very creative and freeing and fuck it in the end, which is a perfect subversion of that premise, which
Yeah. Yeah, and it was important for these characters specifically who have, up until the, events of the book, have been living their lives very, very strictly according to the rules of society, like operating within the confines of this very, very strict social class. James in the servant class, and Christopher as the nobility, and being just kind of like the stricture of that, and the danger of that too. Like the they're doing it, they're able to survive, obviously they're able to live their lives, but there is this confinement that I think is, for both of them, something that I was just like, we just need to break the whole system. Like, how do you do that though in a romance? At the beginning of the book, Christopher is kind of, in his head, in his memories, like, thinking about how the mansion is crumbling down around him, and this is his family's, land that they've been here for centuries and generations, and he feels like if he doesn't keep it going, then he's a failure in some ways. And like the queer answer to that is like, yeah, okay, so what? So I didn't give you grandkids, mom and dad. Like, what are you gonna do about it? Like, that's kind of like my angry shout at that kind of expectation. And I think that even in a contemporary story, it's still relevant, sadly. So yeah,
I was
that
going
was
to
a
say, I
lot of
mean, you
rambling.
do that in Second Chances in Newport Stephen too. I feel that so much with that character's story of like, yeah, like my HEA isn't going to look like what you might have thought, mom and dad, but it's not any less valid. And obviously they're
Yeah.
affirming and come around, but that can be tricky even in a contemporary setting and how you pull off.
Yeah, for sure. I think that, I've had a couple of books that I think the ending is pretty, not, I wouldn't say standard. I think it's like just a normal romance book with a normal romance book ending. They kiss, they, make up, they get together, and now they're together, and that's great. And I do like those stories for sure. I personally am just always trying to figure out something new to do, that's exciting. And if it opens up the possibilities of the genre just a little bit more for somebody else, then I think that that's like icing on the cake.
I love it. Well, and that also leads me to, and Emily, if there are questions from the chat that feel right, please jump in. But I'm also curious around what you hope to see more of. As you're coming into historical romance, you have another one coming out hopefully next year.
Yeah.
Know that publishing timelines are whack, so it's hard to really predict. But curious what you'd love to see more of, stories that are exciting to you, directions that are exciting to you.
Yeah. Since I've been doing this a couple of years now, it's still really, really hard in the romance space, to find other trans authors writing about trans stories, especially trans feminine authors. We have so few romances written and about trans women and trans feminine people. I hate that. I want there to be 1,000 of them, 1,000,000 of them. I think that those stories need to be told, and they're beautiful stories. And I just wish that we had a whole new crop of them every publishing season. We also don't have, as far as I'm aware, in the traditional publishing space, we don't have any trans people of color writing an adult romance. We have some really, really talented people working in YA. Actually, I do think Casey Calendar does have an adult romance, now that I think about it. Yeah, I think Casey, I think that was marketed as adult. Sort of a Hollywood actor
Oh, that's right.
romance. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't,
I can't
yeah.
remember the title of it
God.
now, though. Stars in their eyes. Stars in
Yeah, I've
our
seen the
eyes. Stars in my eyes. Stars are in someone's eyes in this book. Very, very good book. Very heartbreaking. Not a rom-com. Please don't be fooled by the Hollywood cover. A romance, but not a comedy. And Kaysen is one of the most talented authors working in all these different genres. And if we could just get, like, again, 1,000, 1,000,000 more stories from all different kinds of trans people, that's what I'm really excited to start seeing. Because, like, our art of telling our stories, like, if we don't get a chance to put these stories down, like, we're going to lose them. We've seen how history has erased our stories and purposefully taken our stories and changed them. And I feel like a real, like, uh, uh, urge to see these things be put down in the record, hopefully for longer than, like, a couple of years, a couple of decades. Like, I want them to last so that people, like, 100 years from now know, like, oh, we were here, like, we were, like, around, we were, like, falling in love and buying chips at the store and, like, adopting cats and all the stuff that normal people do. And, like, I just, I'm maybe writing stories not about people who are not very normal, but, like, I hope that, like, at least for a small span of time, that they stick with people in some way. Because, like, I do feel this, like, urgency around making sure that our records are preserved in some way. Yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me so much of James kind of comforting Christopher, even that there are people like us, that Christopher can't even imagine, with as sheltered as he's intentionally made his life to, like,
Yeah, well, how could he imagine? How could he imagine when he only talks to, like, the same three people like every day, and if they don't know those stories, and if they don't know that he needs those stories, then how is
yeah,
he ever going to get those stories? It's a cycle that we're still going through today. And I thought, as a younger person, I thought the advent of the internet was going to change everything, and for a lot of trans people it did. But it also also things still say the same in a lot of ways. So yeah, I'm really hopeful that a lot of the publishing houses dig in, double down. I know that my editor for A Gentleman's Gentleman personally, she's just like, fuck it, I'm just gonna sign more gay people. Like she's very, um inspired to continue her work of making sure that people who haven't traditionally been offered a seat at the table in publishing get that. So I hope that more editors follow that sort of example. I hope that more readers follow that example. Yeah, I want to see more of us around, because I know that we're out there and I know we have a lot of cool books to show people.
Yeah. And one of our readers that is participating in the session this time specifically brought up the lack of trans femme representation in historical romance, but romance broadly. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it's
Master isn't able to join us tonight, but would have said yes, because he's like, I can't find a single one to put on my, like the center for the readathon. And that's really hard.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a big bummer, and it's unfortunate because I just want to throw this out there super quick and then we can get back to fun stuff. I especially with trans women and trans femme authors, I've noticed a pattern where they'll write something or they'll create something, they'll put it out there for consumption. People will read it, or whatever kind of art it is, if it's a video game, interact with it. And then they will say, that's so interesting. And I'm so glad that like I supported a trans creator, but I have notes. And they will eviscerate this, woman's work down to like the very last detail. They will dig up records, they'll dig up tweets from, 15 years ago looking for some reason to hate this woman. The trans misogyny that exists, not just like in the world generally and broadly, but in romance, like very, very, I think is entrenched. It's part of the world, so it's there as well. And this visceral reaction that people have to wanting to criticize trans women's art is, I think, coming from a real place that needs to be examined by those critics. I don't think it's criticism. I think that it is bigotry that you are, unable to process in any real meaningful way. There's no other explanation to me to why other authors like myself, like, I hardly get hate mail at all. Like I get hate mail very rarely. But talking to trans women that I know who put themselves out there and make stuff, it is not the same experience for them. And that sucks, and I do not like it. And I really hope that, groups like this, clubs like this, I hope you all hold each other accountable when that ugliness rears its head and people start thinking like, well, it's not that I have a problem with trans women, it's just that ... and then they say it's the most transphobic thing you've ever heard in your life. Like, I hope that is like something that everyone is aware of, because until we confront that, until we do something about that, then I don't think we're going to see very many people of color and trans femme people in the trans romance space, just because it's not going to be worth their while. It's going to be just like hunting season for them, and I don't know why anyone would put themselves in that position willingly. So yeah, just putting that out there.
Yeah, I really appreciate that perspective. And it's a reminder, because all of us in like bookish spaces, right, are so familiar with it's not that I have a problem with X, it's just that, this like veiled criticism that we see so frequent, like I just couldn't feel the chemistry. I just couldn't, it's like there's so many
Ooh, when the feedback is, I just couldn't relate to this person who's not in my demographic. It's like, well, I have been relating to characters in the media who are not like me for a very long time.
Yeah, develop that skill. It's part of reading.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the great things about reading fiction is that it helps people learn empathy, right? Like, we know this through like science, that like people who read fictional accounts and read widely are more likely to have an understanding and empathy of the existence of people's lives outside of their own existence, and I just don't understand why you would want to minimize that in any way by, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
I know that for a lot of people, it's not a conscious thing. It's something that we're all steeped in and need to confront. Even I misgender myself on accident all the time.
Well, I mean, we go back to in our first session of doing this project, we have an RU friend who is a spectroscopist by trade. I probably butchered that.
What's a
She
spectropicus?
is Dr. Debbie Gale Mitchell. She's a chemistry professor,
She's got
and
a book coming out
Dr.
about
got a
Deb.
book coming out
spectroscopy.
on spectroscopy, which I'll read to support Debbie because we adore Debbie. But
Mhm.
she did a talk for us on smog, specifically in London, and we were talking about air pollution because that is a special interest and area of study for her. And so now our Emily phrases, it's the smog we breathe, the
It's
misogyny
in
is
the
the
smog
smog
we
we
all
breathe.
breathe.
Exactly. It's in the morass that we're all steeping
Yeah,
in, unfortunately.
it'll
Yeah,
be reflected out.
and it gets in your nose. Oh, I don't know if you've ever been to London, but like the stuff that comes out of your nose in London,
Oh,
it
yeah.
is a disturbing amount of like you are inhaling things that have been floating around that city since like, Oscar Wilde's day. Like it is no joke.
The cold plate. Oh yeah. Well, I also, if there, and Emily, tell me if there's a question that we should highlight as we wrap up.
No, I
But
mean, I feel like everybody in here is just gushing over this wonderful, soft, beautiful book and wanting to know what you like to read because we just like want to be just
I
like
know that's always the like favorite authors love to read.
yeah.
Currently, I'm trying to read. I mean, it's a great book and I love it, but like again, I'm supposed to be working on something, so I'm not supposed to be reading. But I'm currently reading when I have time. I'm reading Meryl Wilsner's next book that comes out. I think in a couple of weeks. I think it comes out in this month in April. My best friend's honeymoon, about a woman who leaves her fiance kind of at the altar right before the wedding. The honeymoon's already paid for, so she goes on it with her best friend, her non-binary best friend, and they fall in love at
Oh,
this beautiful like Tahiti resort. It is like the perfect, like it is like so freezing here in New York City right now, and cold and dark and damp, and like all I want to do is be on this tropical island with these people. It sounds so much nicer than whatever's going on here. So I'm reading that right now. And I'm also reading, just like for some background, I'm reading some murder mysteries, some thrillers, because I'm also supposed to be working on a thriller. So yeah, I'm going through some homework that I was told by my agent, like, you should really check out this book and this book and this book. So
Is that a contemporary thriller
it
or
is going to be a contemporary thriller. Yes. I won't give away too much just yet, but I'm very excited about it. It's going to be it's going to be really weird. Uh
have you announced this book anywhere? Have you talked about
no.
the writing it
I
through?
haven't sold this book yet. So
Okay, okay.
this is
'Cause I swear I like had a dream and I was like, TJ Alexander has hands in many pots. Like they are writing every
I
genre. They're
do
coming out with a monster romance. They're doing this, they're doing
I
and
do have hands in pots. I do have hands in pots. I have been talking about this thriller as the book I'm supposed to be working on for like many months. Like I am supposed to be working on
okay,
it.
cool, cool, cool. Like I'm
And
like,
have
is this based in reality or is this something that I invented out of whole cloth?
I you might have heard some
I have started
snippet
a
or
rumor. You
something.
heard it here
Or
first,
you may have
folks.
started a rumor. I
Monster
hope
romance.
the monster romance is real though. The
Okay,
monster romance is, sorry, wait. Let's just do a quick recap. Okay, so
okay.
next year, 2026, sequel to A Gentleman's Gentleman comes
Yep.
out in the spring. It's called A Lady for All Seasons, and it's going to star one of the main characters. Etienne is going to be there as like a side piece. he's he likes it there. Don't worry.
He's he's
But the
he's the Birdie Trent
yes, he's just happy to be included.
getting an ATA on the side.
But the main character in A Lady for All Seasons, one of them is going to be Verbena, who we meet in this book. she, still needs a husband. And so she concocts this absolutely unhinged plot to get fake married to ATN. And it's all going so well until a famous gender fluid poetess finds out what their plan is and sort of spreads some gossip around. It's a real wild ride. I'm very excited for people to see it next year. So that's next spring. And then next fall, this was just announced. The deal was just announced, I think last week. I have another contemporary coming out in the fall called Love and Lake Monsters, and it's about a young cryptid hunter who goes to upstate New York to try and track down a fictional local cryptid. And he falls in with a mysterious and isolated mountain man type who agrees begrudgingly to help him hunt this monster. So, I mean, it's not a monster fucker romance, but like a monster is there.
You're in the pipeline, and that's all that matters.
They're in the pipeline. They're in the ether. Yeah. So that's what's coming.
So
that's wonderful.
More next year to look forward to. And again, just so grateful for how gracious you've been in sharing. I am in Eastern Standard Time as well, so I know the commitment doing a late night weeknight. We so appreciate it.
Oh, no, my pleasure. I'm a little eepy, but that's okay. I'm powering through.
I know. It's okay. We get it. I know how it goes. But thank you again. And thanks to everybody who was able to join us tonight.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, everyone.
Oh, man. TJ, thank you so much. This is excellent. We will make this chat go live on YouTube in a few days. My husband's about to get out of town, but while he's gone, I will be sending him this video to edit for me.
Yeah. Thank you, editor husband. Thank you. Shout out to editors.
Yeah, shout out to editors forever. And to you, husband, watching this. Okay, thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you again, TJ. This was really, really wonderful.
Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.